Okay, so in this video, we're going to be talking about a few things, actually, a lot of things, because to understand like how the U.S. economy should basically like compete against BRICS and like North America, how they should, you have to understand how some of the others came into play. So we're going to talk about Belt and Road. We're going to talk about like how the U.S. economy essentially inspired the Belt and Road and stuff like that. So what we do is we have to go back to like post World War I, post World War II. So in a nutshell, when you had societies basically moving from like full-on monarchies to more like constitutional based systems, um, you kind of had a thing where like people didn't know how to arrange their economies in their place, and then there was such a thing as like just a bunch of people were at different like technological like things. Like a example I have is inside the video about fracking and OPEC. Okay, so we know like teams together, everyone achieves more, right? So anyways, under the Marshall Plan, which was essentially like post World War II, if memory serves me correctly, you basically had the U.S. going in. They'd send in basically corporations. They go in and they develop things. There's a lot of movies like the movie like Havana Nights and Dirty Dance, like Havana Nights. Even The Godfather 2 kind of shows like how Havana was a huge spot for this until its government was overthrown and stuff by the Soviet Union. But we're going to skip past that because that's not the main topic of this. But point is, that's just one place. I mean, you see like Macau, China, like in Macau, like basically it's a section of Hong Kong, is still like kind of its own special economic zone. That's another thing. So anyways, China was able to basically copy the Marshall Plan, and they built their Belt and Road, where the Marshall Plan was, okay, we have like the World Bank, they will give a loan out and stuff to an underdeveloping nation to get caught up and then we get kind of access to resources essentially at like a contractual like difference, like a derivative almost, if you think about it. So they do that. You basically get an influx of resources coming in, boom, and then the idea is that you sell your stuff. Like say you have advanced stuff like computers and very good like luxury goods, things like that. That goes into economic north, economic south. When you do that, you kind of have, you start also to, like the dollar was taking out the gold standard in the hopes that it would like, that for the more dollars inflated to make it float essentially within their currency, then you could give out more dollars. It becomes cheaper for other countries to, have those US dollars. And then you can buy like more stuff for cheaper, essentially. So there's like a lot going on with that, right? So pretty much the really big concept that you need to know, the only thing you have to pull for that is I'm looking for cat litter in Walmart, if you're wondering what I'm doing. So the big thing is you deflate your dollars, you give technical expertise, you give funding, like in the form of loans and stuff, to a developing country. They give you raw resources back that you can process into goods to sell back to them, hopefully at a higher rate. Or, by the time you go sell, end products from raw goods you get, hopefully it's supposed to like benefit you in a way. Okay, we got that out of the way. That is the only goal of Belt and Road, and essentially what the Marshall Plan was for the U.S. economy to take over, they created an unbalanced exchange, essentially. And there's even currency manipulations. In fact, you see a lot of people in like Washington, D.C. and stuff, they'll get upset, say, oh, China manipulates our currency. Believe it or not, they learned it off us. That's how they learned how to do that. Like literally everything they get accused of, the U.S. probably did it first. And it's like understandable that they did. I mean, you know, if you're the U.S., it's smart to do it. If you're China, it's smart to rip them off and copy said system, right? Okay. So at the end of the day, China has like the workforce and the human capital to essentially work anyone under the table, outside the exception of like India. They can work anyone under the table at any time. And they have tons of natural resources underneath China. Like, this is really important too. The biggest gold deposit last year, from what I know so far, and this was current as like last fall, was that China basically is sitting on the biggest gold reserve in the world right now. I don't know how easy it is to extract, but it's the biggest from what I know. And because it's the biggest gold reserve, it's going to be really hard for any country to compete with something like that. And then when we talk about BRICS, that's like Brazil, India, Russia, China, and I don't know who else. But BRICS gets people countries coming in all the time. So how do you stop BRICS? How do you stop that? Well, like the Trump administration, you see them trying to essentially absorb like other parts of the continent into the United States, which like it sounds good on paper, right? It honestly sounds brilliant on paper, but you know what would be far easier, right? The euro. The euro is a group of countries that basically came together and they economically cooperate. They join currency. Now, I'm not sure if the U.S. should be joining currencies, but if it was to stop BRICS, I could see it being a viable thing. You know, you already have the United States doing NAFTA, right? Which is like the North American Free Trade Agreement. That means that like there are at least at one time, maybe that changed in the last month or two, but there were zero tariffs for anybody in North America, and they could trade and stuff. Now, I think that was okay-ish. Maybe it helped, maybe it didn't. But you know what could really help? Is if they actually came together and pegged a second currency like the euro. Because a lot of countries in the European Union, you'll see them, they'll have two currencies pegged. You know, their own and then like the euro essentially. And the euro is the only thing that competes with the US. For example, the British pound does so bad on its own that, what's his name? George Soros. Not in this organization, by the way. George Soros is not in this organization. He's in something completely different. People ask me that. No, he is absolutely not. Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of people that aren't that you'd think, but that one's for another video as to why the untrained eye would think that. But anyways, I mean, they do pretty good on their own. Like, they copy us. We copy stuff they do, too. So, I mean, it gets kind of interesting. But the British pound was doing so bad against the dollar that George Soros kept betting on the U.S. dollar as the British pound was sliding, even though technically, like, he's from Great Britain and you'd think he'd, like, care, right? No, because, I mean, the mathematical principles is, you know it's collapsing. You should at least hedge your bets. Okay, this was a long video. I hope you all learned something from it.